Hello, everyone. My name is Rihanna Collier, and I'm the Director of the Software Division at SIIA. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar titled Optimizing Web Performance for SaaS Success. I'd like to thank Keynote Systems for partnering with the SIIA to bring you today's content, which I know you will find extremely valuable. Before I turn it over to our moderator, I just want to give a couple of housekeeping reminders. Our panelists today are looking forward to questions from the audience. I encourage you to enter questions at any time in the chat box to the left of your screen. The panel will also address questions at the end directly through the phone line. When the Q&A portion begins, you'll simply need to dial 14 on your keypad to ask a question. But as I mentioned, we will take questions through the chat box throughout the webinar, so I encourage you not to wait till the end, but to go ahead and plug those in as we move along. Next, I just want to highlight a couple of signature upcoming SIIA events. First is CloudGov, taking place February 17th in Washington, D.C. We're delighted to have a number of top government agencies coming to talk about their movement towards cloud computing. And finally, I encourage you to mark your calendars for All About the Cloud 2011. This is our flagship conference, and it's already shaping up to be the best year yet. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's webinar, Dave Karow from Keynote Systems. I'd like to turn it over to Dave, who will introduce himself and the panel. Dave?
Great. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Dave Karow. I'm a product manager here at Keynote Systems, and I focus on our Internet test and measurement products, which we have a number of clients who use in essentially. We've been around for over a decade, and so we kind of preceded the cloud, but really we've been helping people monitor the cloud for that long. And as more and more companies are coming around to using SaaS solutions for more business-critical solutions, obviously the importance of monitoring those business apps has become more and more important. Our history probably focused more on companies that are delivering direct-to-consumer or business-to-business their own services. Now, obviously, more and more we are working with providers who are SaaS providers to their end customers. So today's webcast is really a chance for you to talk to some very seasoned, very experienced people in the business who have day-to-day responsibility. The first two people who will share sort of some stories about their world are in it day-to-day running solutions for their customers, and then we'll hear from Ben Rushlo, who is our Director of Web Performance Consulting, who is responsible for engaging with some of our largest clients to understand and improve their online experience for their customers. Just a recap, the setup for this call was really if you deliver your products or services over the Internet, then the performance of your SaaS apps are critical to your success. That's probably nothing new, but how you approach that, whether you're using SLAs, whether you're focusing on ROI, whether you're seeing it as a cost, is monitoring a cost center or is monitoring a strategic weapon. I think you'll hear some interesting things today about how people look at their ability to monitor and to use troubleshooting information in a proactive way with their customers. So on that note, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the first of our speakers. Schalk Theron will share with us what he does at SpringCM, and he'll start with a little bit about his background and then the story he'd like to share.
Thanks, Dave, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Schalk Theron. I'm the Vice President of Operations at SpringCM. SpringCM provides an enterprise content management cloud platform for our customers. Now, that's a lot of words. So what that really means is when a customer has a business process that meets an asset such as a document or a form, for example, contract management or invoice approval, they use SpringCM to solve those business problems. My team is responsible for managing this platform, which is 100% cloud. I think that's the latest buzzword in the industry. If I can state it in another way, we are both SaaS, which is the software as a service, and we are PaaS, which is a platform as a service. And so all our customers connect to us over the Internet or over certain type of connectivities. We see millions of hits against our web application from around the globe, although most of our customer traffic is from North America. Monitoring is a very important focus area at SpringCM, and I think I'm enjoying all of the thoughts shared around this conference today, and I hope you will learn from this as well. I want to relay a story that crossed my desk about 6 months ago, and it was about one of the customers called into our sales desk, and they really had a bad experience from a performance perspective with SpringCM. It was unbearably slow to the point that they called in and wanting to cancel their service. Now, once we got involved, the team looked at the historical data from this customer. They identified the 4 or 5 primary sites that they're connecting to us over the internet, and the team identified at their headquarters, a flopping internet circuit. Our team called the service provider. They had the flopping internet resolved. They also identified in 2 more sites, one site with a bad network card, and thirdly, we identified a slow-performing query on our side. We called the customer back with the analysis, provided a professional document to them, and we also gave them an update of what we did to resolve these issues. As a result, this customer was extremely ecstatic with the type of service they received from us, and they renewed for 2 more years. So I do believe this is a theme that you're going to hear from us and from Richard as well. Dave, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Schalk. So we'll now take a minute to meet Richard Broome, Vice President of Operations for Host Analytics. And Richard will share a little bit about what he does there and a story he'd like to bring into the conversation. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Dave. So this is Richard Broome, Vice President Operations at Host Analytics, Inc. I currently oversee our customer support operations, hosting operations, our security and IT infrastructure functions here at Host Analytics. To tell you a little bit about Host Analytics, we're in the corporate performance management space, and we really bring a suite of tools to our customers that really equate to a decision calculation set of tools that really help financial leaders and executives understand and see the financial outcomes of functional decisions within their business. So within the CPM suite, we offer budgeting and planning as well as financial consolidations, financial reporting, and we bolt on top of that a balanced scorecard and dashboard capabilities as well. So that's really the space that we operate in. Similar to SpringCM, we are software as a service. So all of our CPM suite is delivered via the internet to our customers. I will say that I definitely can echo the sentiments that Schalk has shared regarding customer stories. I think that we've all seen them. I have similarly had items come across my desk where customers are experiencing performance issues with using our service. One particular that sticks out is we had a customer who in their corporate location was reporting just unbearably slow performance, and our team was able to rally, apply their strategy, apply the tools available to them, in a very quick fashion to assist the customer with identifying what the problem was, and at the end of the day, it turned out to be a network configuration on the customer's end. So the performance of the application was certainly acceptable in our locations, in various locations at the customer side as well. Performance was satisfactory, but in their corporate headquarters they were having this problem, and given the critical nature of our application, with this particular customer who was a public company trying to close the books at the end of the month and generate their statutory reporting, this is extremely urgent. So we were able to identify what the issues were, assist the customer with getting them resolved, and we certainly went from zero to hero in that situation. But I think that coming out of that, and the whole net of the situation is that you just can't be reactive in monitoring. You got to have a strategy and tools in place when the issue pops up. So I really look forward to what we hear on this call today and sharing some additional thoughts with everyone and hopefully learning something as well. So back to you, Dave.
Great, thanks so much. And that's really a good point about, I've got a little echo on the line, so if my other speakers could mute for a sec, that probably help. Just a shout out to the audience. We really are looking to address specific questions you may have. And just so you know, we will actually not be mentioning your name when you ask them. We'd like to get the most challenging questions possible, and so feel free to raise any issues you'd like feedback from the panel members, and we'll definitely get to that. Whether you do that by the chat or whether you queue up to speak, obviously chat is the easiest way to kind of give your thoughts in detail ahead of time. So with that, I'd like to move over to Ben Rushlo. Ben really has kind of a privileged position here at Keynote because it's sort of a job I used to have. I used to love doing temporary assignments and consulting work because I would jump into somebody else's world and sort of see how they do things and add some value and then move on to the next one. And Ben does quite a bit of that as Director of Web Performance Consulting, which is our engagement service that we have. Ben, go ahead and tell the crowd a little bit about what you do, and then if you could kind of give some thoughts on what you've heard, but also some anecdotes around SaaS engagements that have raised some interesting issues for you and or trends sort of that are emerging in the last year or so.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. So yeah, a little bit about me. I joined Keynote over 10 years ago, so I've been doing web performance optimization. My team and I have been for quite a long time at Keynote, and as part of that, we basically take various performance management inputs, including the great Keynote data, but other data as well, and help customers really understand how they can improve, where they can improve, what's affecting the user experience, and what sort of levers or investments they need to make to improve the experience for their customers. And so as part of that, I mean, we see quite a lot of software as a service companies. And I guess in terms of the anecdotes or things we've seen recently, I guess what's impressed me is that things are just becoming more and more complex, right? So just the fact that there is software as a service or cloud or whatever terms you want to use, something that really wasn't present 10 years ago when I started with Keynote, and back then we were sort of struggling with how does the core of the internet work and can we get very simple content to customers and things like that. And now we're talking about applications and partnerships and third parties and all of this stuff integrating hybrid hosting and CDNs and all of the neat technical pieces that we're all involved in, all of it integrating into really a user experience and helping, and that user experience being critical to revenue, to user satisfaction, to brand, to loyalty, and all of these other things. And so I think what's interesting is that we see this sort of exponential complexity curve happening in terms of our applications and what we're building, and yet at the same time, I think a lot of folks are still sort of very in the very nascent stages of performance management, and performance is just as critical as the two gentlemen who spoke before me mentioned. It's extremely critical. If it's not working, you're going to get a call. Customers are going to complain. There are going to be issues. You're going to have to solve it. And so rather than, from my perspective, what we see is folks need to get ahead of that. They need to build performance into the process. They need to build performance management into their culture, and that's probably nowhere more true than in a true software as a service model where that's what that's what you have. You have the internet. You have the application over the internet, and if you don't have good quality in that, in terms of delivery, in terms of responsiveness, in terms of availability, you're going to have some significant challenges. So I agree with the gentleman who spoke before me, and that performance certainly is something that's critical, and it will be something that I think going forward is even more critical to all these business areas.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Something you mentioned about building it in or having it reminds me of a call I had recently with Schalk where he was talking about how they've really gone. Schalk, if you could talk a little bit about what you do all the way down to the individual customer level in terms of performance monitoring and the availability of those metrics. I think that's something for people to sort of stretch their brain a little bit about what's possible.
Absolutely, Dave. I think we often, or traditionally, we look at monitoring as an after-the-fact event. But if you really look at what's possible is if you start with building monitoring disciplines right into the SDLC, and you then go into the operations side where you monitor customer traffic, you have a third benefit that I think is even more important. In the IT field, as we always go to the CEO of the company or the CIO, and we said, I need to spend this much money at getting these things in place, and he's going to want to know what is your business justification. So one of those things that we've implemented at SpringCM is we set up specific, let's call them customer watch points. And so these customer watch points now, from a SaaS perspective, capture the interaction with our customers with our platform. Now, we don't see the customer data, but we see their behavior with us. We know what pages they go to. So what the account team does is they use those monitoring KPIs and metrics during the monthly account reviews. And they can actually have a constructive discussion with the customer. It says, the site's in Asia. I see this month you guys have loaded 10 more or 100 more users on the site. We know that they are suffering from performance. We can see it. What are the things that we can do on that side? Now, if we look at the business intelligence that comes out of monitoring, you can give the customer extremely valuable information back that says this area of your business, in our case, it could be resume management or contract management or invoice payable. You can say that from a business perspective, those things is being used more, and the customer then has that data to staff up better in their department. So it comes back to not just monitoring as an after-the-fact thought. It does include it into running that customer and extending that information transparently back to the customer so they can make business decisions with it.
Yeah, I think when you were mentioning that an individual customer could actually see their metrics almost as if they're sort of snooping over the shoulder of the NOC person, I think that's really pretty progressive in terms of companies. You look at big players like Salesforce has trust.salesforce.com, and that sort of tells you the status of their major infrastructure pieces. But being able to see that I, as customer X, have done 47 transactions in the last 10 minutes, and the response on them was thus and such. I think it's pretty interesting idea.
Absolutely, and also it's not a free service. So as again from a service provider community, we try and make everything free, which is not always the right way of doing it. It could be an advanced subscription that you upsell through the sales process, and then you display that in a customer dashboard. So it's beneficial for your company, so you generate more revenue, but it's also very beneficial for the customer reviewing this at any point in time.
Great. Okay. So I think at this point we probably can kind of broaden the conversation out a little bit and talk about, we were thinking we would talk about ROI specifically, but I think that it would be useful for us to focus on how you position the monitoring and the concern for performance. As Ben mentioned earlier, it's kind of paradoxical. There for a number of years, people who were focused on performance were actually kind of in the minority, and the requirements for developing a solution were always first and foremost, and whether it could do the right features and have the right look and feel. And then performance was quite often anyway, sort of an afterthought very late in the game. And in another call, I was speaking with someone who they literally had their entire team from top to bottom had incentives around performance, and they were looking at split-second response times for every major transaction that they designed as they built the solution. So performance has kind of come of age where it's definitely more important, and it's more getting a higher priority. And nowhere other than in SaaS ironically, is it A, more important, and B, not fully under your control. So I'm kind of curious, Richard, if you could share a little, there's always a balance. There's the stuff you can control inside your data center, inside your infrastructure, and then there's the stuff that happens between you and your customers or at the customer site. And, you have to kind of pick your battles and divvy up your resources. How do you wrestle with that sort of that part of it?
Well, I mean that's a pretty complex That's definitely a pretty complex question or decision that each individual company has to has to arrive at on their own within their own executive leadership. But I think that there's a lot of things that come into play there. What's your profile as a SaaS company? So what's your MRR per customer? What's the effect on your churn values, right? If you lose a customer, how deep down the rabbit hole do you need to go to try to diagnose performance issues? So what's the impact to you if you drop a customer because they're experiencing performance issues? So there's definitely a lot of things that have to be considered to go into determining what the robustness of your monitoring suite's going to be.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're sort of talking about the triage and the sort of cost benefit of, if this is a trial customer who will never spend more than $1,000 a year with you, should you devote half your team to, parachuting in to fix it? The answer would probably be no.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that Schalk, when you work with the other members of your management team, how do they look at monitoring and at the sort of the health of infrastructure in terms of you mentioned that you actually have that dashboard as a premium offer for your customers. How is the whole notion of feedback and of knowing how the infrastructure is running, and even all the way down to the individual customer, how is that viewed by folks outside of your peers in management?
It's a great question, Dave. And so I'd love to start with saying they absolutely love it. And so I remember the day I walked over to the sales guys again and says, how about we come up with a model? We've got a lot of good monitoring data for our customers, but how about we convert that data into customer dashboards? And as you go through the sales process, you use that as an advanced feature, let's call it a VIP service or such, and the sales guys loved it. I think there's even before the customer signs up, I see a very interesting process the customer follows at choosing a SaaS or a cloud provider. They firstly have some kind of a defined business problem, and then they look at suppliers in the market and identify maybe 2 or 3 of those suppliers, and they go through due diligence, and it doesn't just stay in that due diligence with what's the functionality of their platform. They clearly, before the deal is signed, they look at the operational stability of the company. And inside of that, they do ask a lot of questions about security. Now, we're talking a lot more about application performance monitoring, but as Richard and myself know as well, as security monitoring is just as important part of it. But when the customer now connect with us and asking those questions, they come from a place in an enterprise perspective where they are used to monitoring suites inside of their corporate environment. And now they've got a trust issue. Do they give you their data, their most critical business processes? And I've seen customer after customer after customer, when they come to how we monitor the platform and how we give that information back to them, they feel that trust develop between them and the service provider. I've had a great customer story, and again, we can spend a lot of time on the theory of monitoring. We can talk about application performance monitoring 2.0 and what will it look like 10 years into the future. But there's some very simple things we can put in place virtually in any cloud provider. For instance, let me give this example. We did have a customer, they run a critical business process. It's inside of the medical community, and doctors across the United States has to receive permission in certain business process before medicine is dispensed. And it could be life-threatening if that SLA is not met. And so what we've done is if we have detected in their business process running in our data centers a SLA that is being threatened, our team will actually open up help desk tickets inside of this customer environment in their help desk environment, so that customer is totally transparent about what the service is we provide to him, as if we are sitting on site. So I want to end on a comment here, and Richard said it very well. In the cloud business, we are really focusing on annual recurring revenue or monthly recurring revenue. It is very difficult to make a customer in the cloud industry. It's even more difficult keeping that customer. But when you can invest in that area, you can clearly see 80 to 90 to 95% retention rate of your customers, and that revenue rolls over year after year after year.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. No one likes churn, but it's kind of the nature of the beast. And when you're, a lot of what the promise of the cloud is interchangeable parts and utility computing and all of that, and the reality is that there may be portions of your technology which are unique, but our experience has been that the customer service and the way people are treated and the way you respond to incidents and the way that you can stand by them when there are challenges is actually what is the strongest thing that retains them, not so much feature checkboxes. Delivering a different level of service. And I suspect that when customers interact with you, Richard, or you, Schalk, your firms, and they experience, oh wow, this is not just some company that is hosting this thing on the internet and claims it's all going to be fine, but to actually be able to show metrics and offer a real-time dashboard and offer to have these, for instance, these help desk tickets be something the customer is in the loop on, as opposed to just calling for status. It makes a difference. I'm just doing a time check really quick here. So it's coming up on half past the hour, and I want to once again shout out to the participants. If you could ask these people anything about strategy or about trends or any of that sort of thing, just go ahead and fire away some questions in the chat box there, or let us know you're going to want to jump on the phone. I want to make sure we have enough time for that. And I think one thing that I kind of like to shift gears now and just let's go a little. I'm kind of remembering Richard mentioning rabbit hole. I hope it's not a rabbit hole, but let's go a little deeper technically at this point and talk about things that can be done to improve performance, and whether they're part of the initial development and optimization or they're add-ons, things that are done after you're up and running. Frankly, I'll go with Richard or Schalk, whichever wants to jump in, and then we'll go back to Ben about talking about some of the sort of the methodology of identifying issues and then having a periodic way to, here at Keynote we actually have a very standardized procedure where on a monthly basis we deliver insights and recommendations and sort of identify goals. Let's just kind of have an open panel discussion for a few minutes about some of the more technical things that can be done and the process around sort of investing in performance as early as possible, and then through the life cycle all the way to when you're in production. Who wants to take that one?
Well, let me start off with kind of the three things that jump to mind, and then Richard, you can kind of echo from your side as well. And again, I want to make the statement that performance is not a difficult thing to focus on. It's sometimes much easier, and if we look at the different capabilities from vendors such as Keynote, it's very, very affordable. But two things that I've seen from a development perspective is, that has added a lot of value. For instance, number one is just the concept of round trips to the data center. We often have developers that comes out of an on-premise kind of development shop. And when you're in the cloud industries, you've got to think of that delivery vehicle being the internet, which is not very predictable. And that your customers is across anything from a dial-up, if that still exists, but an internet access to corporate access. So if you look at that early in the development lifecycle, is you've got to look at your code that says how many round trips does it take to the data center in order to build that page. And there's many freeware utilities you can download. You can plug it into the browser, and you can open up the application. And it's a very easy way of actually doing due diligence on a SaaS provider is load up his app, and in one of these browser kind of sniffer programs, see how many round trips it takes to the data center. I think the second one, I want to talk a little bit more development. It's not just the number of round trips, but it's how efficiently do you use that round trip. And in that case, I want to talk about sprites. So sprites, for instance, is the principle of In the Web 2.0 environment, we normally want to make our interfaces look very usable and friendly. So you download a lot of icons, and in the old days, you could make 100 round trips, download it each at a time. A sprite is where you download 100 or 200 bitmaps in one specific call. And then what you do is you use CSS to do some trickery at showing just the exact image on the screen. So basically, you cut down that chatter between the browser and the data center. And I think the third thing there as well, it's very, very important, is about caching. When you look at caching, you should think of an architecture that caches objects inside of the data center. You should think of how you could leverage CDNs to cache objects at various different parts across the globe. And then you've got to think of what kind of caching you can use at the browser. How do you cache at the browser effectively? How do you compress the data? And what's that performance gain as well? So I think those are kind of the three things that stands out for me that I've practically observed: round trips to the data center, using modern development techniques such as sprites, and absolutely leveraging caching all throughout the communications. Richard, anything you want to add on to that?
Yeah, Schalk. So, I mean, definitely. I mean, I think that you're definitely right on with the things that you mentioned. I mean, round trip, analyzing round trips is critical. How do we manage connections? Are we managing connections efficiently? Everything from caching to analyzing chatter between the client and the data center. I mean, all of those things are technical. Technical things that you certainly need to be aware of and looking into. But I mean, if we could just take a step back before we get into the real the technology that's available to you to be able to diagnose and identify issues where they may or may not appear. I think the most critical thing is to just have a performance-oriented culture within your organization itself. And so I can tell you that at Host Analytics, performance is built directly into the development process. But even before that, just from a conceptual standpoint, when our product managers are developing product requirement documents, I did want to mention that I think one critical item is that you understand what's your performance impact and what are your performance expectations for any new product feature or an incremental change to a product feature. As early in the process as you can introduce those discussions and have people having to spend some cycles to consider that and to evaluate it, you're just really kind of driving home and building a performance-oriented culture within your development organization, your engineering organization, so that as it comes time to can I have my requirements from product management and I'm going to go build this, it's on their mind and people are thinking about it and they're working toward how can I make this perform at the highest level possible. So I think that's a critical piece as well as just the culture management or the cultural engineering that goes on within all of our organizations are equally as critical as the various tools or techniques for diagnosing and analyzing performance.
Yeah, that's just some great points. It reminds me of we're lucky when we do these calls. We typically get to bring in people who are leaders in their space and are doing good stuff. In another call, this exact same issue, the culture, and Schalk was talking about how a developer may come to you from more of an on-premise background. And there's a firm out here in San Francisco that does some pretty amazing high-performance stuff, and they literally have financial incentives for the entire development team based on total round-trip time for customer requests. So, and I don't mean individual round trips. I mean literally for each kind of unit of work that a customer is paying them for, like the ability to answer a query or store a document or this sort of thing, that the round trip time for that whole transaction to happen all the way out to the part they can't control out there on the internet is part of their incentive. And so people think much more when you have that kind of an incentive in place. People take much more ownership for using things like sprites, where you're sending one image instead of 50 images. And it's a little bit more work up front to have the sprite and use the CSS to dice it up and serve up the images, but it's a huge performance gain. How do we make that database activity happen mostly in the data center and not have the browser making 257 requests that all have to go back and hit by a database and come back? How can you have that stuff happen in bigger chunks? And I think that you guys both spoke about that, which is great. Is that sometimes there's a rush to get to market with a solution, or there's a need to kind of, we're at the point now where you can't afford to just take an on-prem solution, call it SaaS, and see if anybody's going to buy it. Or if you've got that luxury, you don't have very much time before you're going to need to make sure that it really is optimized for being served over the internet, particularly over longer distances where latency gets amplified a lot. So I did have a question come in. I wanted to go to kind of mix it up a little bit. Kind of like, this one's interesting. Where have we been or come from in the last few years, and where are we going? Is cloud mostly here now? Are we due for yet a whole nother sort of crushing evolution? Put where we are today in context of kind of where we've come in the last 3 or 4 years and where we might be going in the next. And I know this is kind of theoretical, but it's an interesting question we got. Put us in context historically, looking a little bit back and a little bit forward. What happens next?
Yeah, so this is Richard. I mean, if I could jump in there. So, whenever I first, came to join the team here at Host Analytics, probably 6 years ago, the message that we beat the streets with was, SaaS is faster, quicker, cheaper. And that message worked. I mean, it helped us all gain traction and really, begin to define the space and build the space out. But I think that the transition or the transformation that we see taking place today is how is SaaS genuinely better, and why is it better uniquely because it's SaaS, right? So at Host Analytics, we compete. The majority of the competes that we have are with on-premise vendors. From a feature function, perspective, I mean, the myth that SaaS is a lighter weight, less functionality, option to go with that's been completely dispelled. So now, how do we leverage our value proposition uniquely because we're SaaS? What can we offer uniquely because we're a SaaS application that our on-premise competitors, can't offer? And I think that is the direction that that SaaS companies need to be focused in. And this performance monitoring is the perfect example of where you can leverage unique benefits of being SaaS that a prospect or a customer could not achieve with an on-premise vendor. And that might be metadata of performance across your entire user base. So if you're providing a customer with with dashboards or insights into their performance, how do they benchmark across customers who are doing similar functions or using similar processes within your application? The actual transaction monitoring, and I'll give you an example. At Host Analytics, we have customers who generate financial reports, and our application has some built-in tools to monitor not only the individual transactions required to generate that, but the total run time or the entire page build time for that function. And if there is something anomalous, we can generate a support ticket on behalf of the customer. One of our support reps can reach out proactively to the customer. Can forward them knowledge base on report writing best practices or snippets of video on best practices for tuning and optimizing financial reports. Those are benefits that you bring to the space uniquely because you're a SaaS vendor and your on-premise competition cannot do that. I think that's probably I think as it pertains to this call, I mean, that's a key point to make is that, SaaS is no longer faster, quicker, cheaper as its only value proposition. We have value and we bring value to our space respectively, uniquely because we're SaaS.
Yeah, I think Richard has nailed it on the head as well. But I just attended a conference in DC about a month ago, and this conference was attended by leaders across the world, everything from the Economic World Forum to various different countries. And cloud computing today is seen as the third evolution of technology. And that first step that we saw way back in the old days, kind of the mainframe world, and it kind of progressed into the second wave, which is client server. And so if we look at cloud computing today, that's truly our current application of technology. Now, do not be confused. It is an extremely disruptive application of sometimes known technologies. And things that we do need still as we go into this third evolution of technology is things like reference architectures. It's things like taxonomy. So there will be still a phase, I think, as we go through cloud computing that the rules is defined, the definitions is clearly defined. But if I would change the tables today and put myself in a CIO position at an enterprise company, I will look at that demand and supply, and I would truly use cloud inside of the company and cloud outside of the company to deal with that supply, because today the CIO just cannot supply enough services to keep up with the business demand. So it's not a question anymore whether cloud is a fad or not. It is the third wave of computing, and all of us needs to know how to apply that to our business challenges.
Yeah, thanks for that. So, hey, Ben, I know we, I kind of like, kind of torn here because I know you can't really give too much detail on client engagements, but I think there was a question that came in on the Q&A, which was, what are the biggest challenges to your customers and prospects when trying to use SaaS, or what are the key pain points that you have tackled or you're in the process of tackling? And I think that I'm kind of curious if you could speak a little bit about the process of identifying issues and then queuing them up, and then realistic. Different organizations have different rates of change or rates of addressing issues, and some very large traditional companies may literally be thrilled if in a year they can make significant changes, and there's startups that basically give themselves 10 days. Can you give some thoughts about kind of what are the biggest challenges in terms of performance and SaaS success we're seeing now, and how the different firms deal with it, or how the process around that happens?
Yeah, sure. I've just been enjoying listening to the co-presenters, because I think it sounds like they really have, in terms of performance, they have their act together. And I think that was what was interesting, as Schalk talked about some of the key points that I would bring up in terms of what are the challenges with performance around round trips and using sprites and caching, and I'd add some other things like browser threading to that, and third-party integration, and of course the back-end delays and AJAX on the client side. And then Richard really hit the nail on the head, which is say, hey, take a step back, and really all that doesn't matter. What really matters is performance as a culture, and whatever tools and techniques you want to use, that certainly use those as those become available to you in your unique environment. And I think they're both right. I think what the interesting thing is if you were listening to this conversation, you would think, oh wow, its performance is pretty simple, or these guys got it figured out. Everybody else should have it figured out. And the reality is most companies don't, right? You go talk to a company just about something as simple as round trips, and they don't really get that, right? They don't understand that the internet was not designed to send lots of bits of bytes. It's really better about sending large pieces of data, and that's why you need to minimize round trips, or you talk about caching, you're talking about third-party integration, and most people just don't get it. So from our perspective, I am in complete agreement, but I think the whole process of optimization really starts with collecting accurate data, because I can't tell you, Dave, how many people I've talked to, CIOs, all the way down to really good developers who just have no concept of what's good or what's bad in performance. So everybody talks, lip service to performance. Oh yeah, things need to be fast. Well, what does that mean? Does it mean for a page to come in a page model, it can take 5 seconds? Well, no. We would say it needs to take under 2 seconds. How about in a SaaS application where you're really kind of not really pages, but clicks or mini transactions? Well, those maybe should be taking hundreds of milliseconds, right? And so the first piece is you have to measure accurately what you have, and a lot of companies aren't doing that. They're using internal metrics, or they're using some sort of very low-level, free-level tools, and they're not really capturing what it really is taking in terms of performance and errors and everything else. And then the second is you have to apply some context to it. So you have to understand, is it good, is it bad? what can I do to improve? And then thirdly, it's sort of going to the next step of what's affecting the user the most, and then what can I do about it in terms of technology. And you're right, some companies, we can get them to that point very, very quickly, and they can make changes and be very responsive. And in 3 months, they can shave off huge amounts of download time or performance improvements, and and also improve their availability and other things. And then other companies, you work with them very, very slowly because they're not nearly to the level that our co-presenters are here, and they're just sort of baby stepping it. But really, all of it begins with collecting good data, and Keynote is a great way to do that. Other ways, you want to add other things to it, like the co-presenters have mentioned, customer analytic data, internal data, etc. But you first have to kind of get a profile and then understand, how do I apply these best practices? Because everybody has all these best practices floating out there, but it might not be applicable to your particular software as a service site or application. And I think that's really the challenge, is people sometimes try to run before they're walking there, I guess. So they need to start collecting some good data first, and then making the right choices based on data.
Got it. That's great. I think we've covered the questions that have come in, and we've covered a lot of material. And I think that one of the things I love is attending a meeting which ends a little bit early. So I'm actually thinking that it would be good for us to wrap in the next 3 to 5 minutes, give people 10 minutes of their day back if they were planning to be busy for the whole hour. And so I think if I just step back and I look at what have we learned, or what are the sort of the key takeaways? Obviously, performance and SaaS success are very closely tied to each other, and they require a culture around it, and they require metrics and tools. It's really both. And Richard was focusing on if you have the culture there, then stuff's going to take care of itself to some extent. And you and Schalk talked a little bit about some of the specifics. The bottom line is that you can't manage what you don't measure, and so find a way to measure and find a way to benchmark against your competitors. We didn't really get into that a lot, but I think that's kind of implicit in some of what you were saying in terms of setting a context. Is it good? Is it bad? How am I doing? And then take a very sort of, I think one thing that's in common here is a very proactive and forward-leaning approach to performance, not a defensive one. I spent some time in more of a telecom space a few years back, and seemed like the primary discipline was learning how to point your finger the other direction if there was ever some issue, and that was pretty much what all the various players in the telco stack would do, is basically just make sure they could prove that fault isolation was prove it's not me. And I think that what I see, one thing that's actually one of the cool byproducts of SaaS is that if you're delivering a solution and you're displacing an in-house solution, you can't afford to say, oh, it's your internet service provider and that's why you're not getting what you need, or oh, it's our CDN, they're having some issues, but we're great, and sorry you aren't able to get what you need, but we're doing fine here. It requires a more outreaching and collaborative approach, and a problem solving that's not about isolating and pointing in the other direction, but on making problems go away no matter where they exist. And both Richard and Schalk talked about customer premise issues they were able to resolve. One of the things I do here at Keynote is manage a product called Kite, which is it has several uses. One of them is that it runs a Keynote agent right there on your desktop. And I was talking to a company where they literally had this beautiful new data center, and they had a facility just 2 countries away in Europe, pretty close by, that was saying, oh, it's horrible. Your new application and your new data center is just horribly slow. And they used Kite on both ends, in the data center and at the remote location, and compared their numbers running the exact same script, and found that there was some very strange network activity going on. And it turned out that the remote site had a horribly misconfigured network appliance. And in resolving that, they collaborated over the phone to figure out what was really going on, and they figured out that it was actually something fairly fundamental. And I fortunately or unfortunately, hear that story again and again about. The other day I was talking to somebody who mentioned that they had a fairly large customer who had something on the order of 200 people sitting behind a residential wireless router. And so they had sort of a $40 wireless router that was supporting this key hub of employees who were all contending for the same network access. And shocking as it would be that the performance wasn't very good. So I think that I really appreciate what you guys have been able to share in terms of specifics and strategy. And I hope that I'm sure we'll be archiving this call. I hope that those of you who are listening after the fact, as well as those who joined us today, have gotten some value from this. And we appreciate our participation in the SIIA. Their software division is working very well with us to set these calls up. We hope you're enjoying it. And we'll definitely get back out to you with a recording of this if you want to share it with colleagues or reference back to it. I think that pretty much wraps it up at this point. And I want to thank you again for your time and have you all have a great day. And here's your 10 minutes back to your life.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That does conclude the conference call for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect all lines. Thank you and have a good afternoon.